السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Yasin, and we'll go through inshallah ta'ala verses 65 to 68. Surah number 36, Surah Yasin, and verses 65 to 68 inshallah. So please follow with the recitation. Okay, we'll start. Repeat after me inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. Again, ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. اليوم نختم نخاء ذهبي على 45 counts أفواههم، وتكلمنا 45 counts أيديهم، وتشهد أرجلهم 2 counts ميم after الباء أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء 45 counts لطمسنا. The ta is heavy, the lam is light, and after it is light. لطمسنا على 45 counts أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط. صاد is heavy and ta is heavy. فأن 2 counts باء is قلقلة يبصرون. ولو نشاء again also mad 45 counts لمسخناهم خاء is heavy لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا تاء is light ta is heavy فما استطاعوا مضيا تنوين after it مضيا ولا يرجعون ضاء is heavy. ومن نعمره ومن 2 noon 2 counts نعم the meme with shadda 2 counts, and then you have the ra light because the letter before it has a kasra. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق. Then if you stop there the qaf with the qalqala أفلا يعقلون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم. The translation says, this day we shall seal up their mouths, and their hands will speak to us, and their legs will bear witness to what they used to earn. As you see here, it's continuing of what's mentioned about the Day of Judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to al-yawm, on the Day of Judgment, the Day of Resurrection. اليوم نختم على أفواههم. On that day we will seal. نختم. Al-khatm is the seal. And we'll talk about the word inshallah. على أفواههم, on their mouths. وتكلمنا أيديهم, and their hands will speak to us. وتشهد أرجلهم, and their legs will witness. بما كانوا يكسبون, with what they've earned, what they've done. This is regarding the disbelievers and the hypocrites in the day of Al-Qiyamah, when they would deny what they've committed in this life, and they would even swear that they didn't do it. And this is something that is mentioned in the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will seal their hearts, seal their mouths, and their parts of their body will speak. And Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentioned some of the narrations about this is when the Prophet ﷺ, he smiled, and they asked the Prophet ﷺ, why are you laughing or smiling? So he says, from how the slave of Allah, min mujadalati al-abdi rabbahu yawm al-qiyam, that the slave of Allah, from how he would debate or dispute with his Lord in the day of Al-Qiyamah, and he would say, Rabbi alam tujirni min al-dhulm, oh Allah, didn't you forbade me from al-dhulm or injustice? So he would say yes. He says, I want a witness from my own self. And he would say, كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا, and وبالكرام الكاتبين شهودا. That it's even though the hadith has weaknesses in it, but it refers to this, that he wants witnesses, and his mouth will be sealed, and his parts of his body will speak. So this is clearly stated here in the Quran, and Surah Fussilat also gives the same meaning. And all of that is by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of establishing the justice, the ultimate justice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon humanity. And even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nobody is to question him when he punishes whoever he will subhanahu wa ta'ala based on his justice subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this is again the perfect justice. And this hadith is authentic that I just mentioned now, and it's mentioned in Sahih Muslim and others, that he says the slave of Allah would say, you forbade me from dhulm, so I don't allow for myself except that there's a witness from my own self. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will seal his mouth, and he would say to his body to speak. So the body will speak. And as the hadith says that ثُمَّ يُخَلَّ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ الْكَلَامِ, then after his body will speak, it will be said to him, then go ahead and speak now. Then he would say, بُعْدًا لَكُنَّ وَسُحْقًا فَعَنْ كُنَّ كُنْتُ أُنَاضِلْ. He would say to his body, he would say to his parts of his body that spoke against him, witnessed against him, بُعْدًا. He would, بُعْدًا, that means far away you are, and سُحْقًا, like perished you are, away from the mercy of Allah you are. فَعَنْ كُنَّ كُنْتُ أُنَاضِلْ. For you I was defending, I was trying to defend you, meaning his parts of his body. So he would become angry with his own parts of his body because they witnessed against him. So this is what's going to happen in the day of judgment if someone denies, or again, mainly the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and any sinner that will go into the same way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described how terrifying that scene and how evil they are in the day of judgment. اليوم نختم على أفواههم, that we will seal their mouths, they're not able to speak. وتكلمنا أيديهم, the hands will speak. The way of Ahl Sunnah in making the tafsir of the Quran, right? That this is going to happen. It's not going to be something, it's not metaphoric. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to make the hands speak. What's difficult for that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to do all things. And their legs will speak. That's why where we go, what do we do? All of that, what we earned, we have to be watchful of that. And then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَطَمَسْنَا عَلَىٰ أَعْيُنِهِمْ فَاسْتَبَقُوا الصِّرَاطَ فَأَنَّ يُبْصِرُونَ. which means that if had been our will, we would surely have wiped out or blinded their eyes so that they would struggle for the path. How then would they see? What that refers to is basically if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He would make them not able to see. And they won't be able to see, so they will try to go to the Sarat to pass on it to the Jannah. How can they do that if they don't have eyesight? And it basically refers to, as Ibn Abbas, he says, that if Allah wills, He would have deviated them away from guidance. So how can they be guided? And guidance meaning, or not be guided, that means they become blind. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He would make them blind, whether it's physically or for a non-physical meaning that they are deviated from the truth. فَاسْتَبَقُوا الصِّرَاطِ, that means they would stabaku, that means they would race to, they would become in haste to go to the Sarat, because this Sarat or this path is what is going to lead them to Jannah. فَأَنَّ يُبْصِرُونَ, how can they see the Sarat when they did not see the truth? They were blind from the truth in this world, so how can they see the Sarat or the straight path on top of the hellfire when they didn't see it in this world? So this is also repeating this meaning of there are two Sarat, two paths that human beings, if they pass this one on this life, the Sarat al-Mustaqim, the straight path in this life, which is the deen of Allah, they will pass the Sarat in the hereafter. And if they were deviated away from the Sarat in this life, they will be deviated, not seeing the Sarat in the hereafter. That means they will fall into the hellfire. And everything is by the will of Allah, and the will of Allah is based on the wisdom of Allah and the power of Allah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the hadith about as-salat, there are so many. And when the salat, the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ is called in the Day of Judgment, and the salat is going to be established, and everyone, al-barr wal-fajr, the righteous ones and the wicked ones, would follow the Prophet ﷺ to try to cross the salat. As in some of the narrations, because of this, as when they come there, when they get there, and you can imagine their eyes would not be able to see. So they try to go to the salat, but how can they see it? So if they don't see it, that means they're going to fall in it. So this is how can they be guided if they don't see it? And it shows how they ought to have seen it in this life for them to benefit. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah said, وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَطَمَسْنَا عَلَى أَعْيُنِهِمْ, if you will, we would wipe over their eyes. That means they're not able to see, as we wiped over their speech, as the previous verse. فَاسْتَبَقُوا الصَّرَاطِ, that means they become in haste to go to the Sarat, because that's the path that leads to Jannah. فَأَنَّ يُبْصِرُونَ, how can they see when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their eyes blind from it? And then the next ayah, وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَمَسَخْنَاهُمْ عَلَى مَكَانَتِهِمْ فَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا مُضِيًّا وَلَا يَرْجِعُونَ. And if we will, لَمَسَخْنَاهُم, that we could have transformed them. Al-masakh is to be transformed to something else, animals or something like this, in their places. Then they should have been unable to go forward, nor they could have turned back. So, وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَمَسَخْنَاهُمْ عَلَى مَكَانَتِهِمْ, on their spot. That means destroyed them, as Ibn Abbas he said. Or changed transformed their creation, to make them stones, to make them animals. فَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا مُضِيًّا, they're not able to go forward, and they cannot go back. They would only stay or stationed in one place, because they have been transformed to something else, which shows the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is whether it refers to the hereafter, فَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا مُضِيًّا, to go forward, or to go back, to go away from the hellfire. So these disbelievers, when the punishment is established upon them, there's no escape from the punishment. The hellfire is right in front of them, and they will be thrown into the hellfire, and no one is going to be safe unless they cross the salat. Okay, so if you're able to picture that, the hellfire is down, and the salat is on top of the hellfire, and on the other side is the Jannah. So no one is going to enter Jannah unless they cross the hellfire. On top of the hellfire, there's the salat. So if someone is blind, is not able to see the salat when it's as thin as a hair, right? That means they're not going to pass to Jannah. And if they are stationed in their position, they cannot go forward. That means they cannot enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is basically refers to the disbelievers. So since the hellfire is there and there's no salvation except to cross it, and that's only to be done by the people of Al-Iman, the people of faith, those who would walk with the light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them. And as for those, there is no salvation for them from the hellfire. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, He would make their eyes blind and make them stationed, not able to move, so they're not going to be guided to the Salat. And even if they try to go to it, right, and they would not be able to. So either they're blind and not seeing it, or they're stationed. So it basically shows that the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if the decree of Allah for them to be punished, nobody can save them. And then the next ayah, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسُهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسُهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. And he whom we grant long life, we reverse him in creation, weakness and so on. Will they not then understand? وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسُهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. It shows the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth. Which basically says وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing us about something that we know, and that's something that we see, but many people, they don't take benefit from it or reflect upon it. That the sons of Adam, human beings, the more they live, longer they live, the more weaker they become. And this is clearly stated in the Quran in more than one place. Allah الذي خلقكم من ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبة. Allah created you from weakness, then gave you from the weakness strength, then He gave you from the strength weakness and shayba and gray hair. يخلق ما يشاء. This is the will of Allah. He creates whoever He wills, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهو العليم القدير. He's the all-knower, the one that is able to do all things. وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرَدُّ إِلَىٰ أَرْذَلِ الْعُمُرِ. Some of you that would live till they are very old in age and they become weak. And this is how the more they live, the more this is going to be the case. So, and what is meant by this is that to show that this worldly life is going to vanish, is going to be finished, and we are not living on the face of earth forever. Don't you see that you were weak and you were given strength, and then the longer you live, you're going to lose that strength and you're going to be weak. And then if a person lives that long, if a person lives a long life, this is what happens to him. And then after that, they still going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they will die. Nobody lives forever. أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Don't they have reason? So that they would use their reason to see this. So when you use your reason to see the beginning at the end, and it keeps on repeating, that means the cycle, nobody can escape it. So we're not created for this life, we're created for the hereafter. And this is all part of the means to believe in the hereafter. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah said, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ. Whoever give him a long life from the sons of Adam, نُنَكِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. Al-tankis is to go back. And that's the tankis in the surah, which is disliked if it's surah to a surah as far as the order, but it's not permissible in the same surah. And the tankis is when you recite in the first rak'ah the last verses of a surah, then the second rak'ah you recite the first verses of the same surah. Tankis, that means you return back. So nunakisu fil khalq, that means their creation will be returned back, going back to the weakness again. Weakness in one's reason and intellect, and weakness in strength. So أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Shouldn't they have aql to use it to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So this is ayat that should touch the hearts and makes us see the hereafter and looking into our life when we're still alive, so that we repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is when you follow the verses like this, and it shows how evil the ways of the disbelievers and how ignorant they are. And the Surah Yasin talks a lot about the Day of Judgment and the proof of the Day of Judgment, and towards the end of the Surah even more and more proofs to this. Going to the words اليوم نختم على أفواههم. اليوم, on that day, the day of Al-Qiyamah, نختم from kha ta mim, which is al-khatm is al-tab' or the seal, And the seal is when something is covered with so much strength, like when the money is sealed, when things are sealed. So that means once it's sealed, there's no way for it to change. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ختم الله على قلوبهم. He sealed the hearts of the hypocrites. ختم على سمعه وقلبه. Some people, they're sealed in their ability to listen. They don't listen to the truth. It's been sealed. And this is a dangerous thing. And as always mentioned, this is the worst punishment that happened to a person in this life. You know, when you speak to your children sometimes, they're not listening, right? Because their hearts are busy. And they need to revive their hearts and to use it so that they're able to benefit from what they hear. And this is the sign of the hardness of the heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. And this is valid to be reversed if a person repents to Allah. اليوم نختم على أفواههم, their mouth, from فاء وهاء, and this is الفم, which is the mouth and the opening of things. وتكلمنا, and it will speak to us, from كاف لام ميم. أيديهم, their hands will speak. وتشهد, and شهد, from witness, and it would bear witness. أرجلهم, and الكلام is very obvious, and the witness also is very obvious. أرجلهم, their feet. بما كانوا يكسبون, with what they used to earn from كسب, and that's what a person earned is their actions, the actions of the human beings, what the hand did, what the legs took them to. And usually the al-kalam wa shahada, right, when you see the difference between the hands and the legs might not be committing sins, right? If you pay attention to the difference here, the legs take you to the places, whether it's good places or bad places. So it witness over the person, because a person would say, I'm just walking, right? But where are you going? The hands has some more of a direct effect to the sin itself. A person would use the hands to commit sins, stealing, things like that. So that's why it's different between speaking and witnessing. ولو نشاء, and if we willed, from Shin Ya Alif, لطمسنا. طمس is to wipe something. A tams is when something is wiped completely, and that thing that is wiped does not exist anymore. Someone's eyes is wiped, as the Dajjal is, that means it's wiped. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم, so that means it does not have an effect, of that's not able to see. And also فإذا النجوم طمست, when the stars will be طمست, that means it's wiped, there's no light for it. And when Musa alayhi salam, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ربنا طمس على أموالهم, Allah wipe over their wealth, that means it does not exist, it's of no benefit. So لطمسنا على, that we would wipe over their eyes, على أعينهم, from عين ياء نون. فاستبقوا, so they would go further in a race, from sin ba qaf, which is race, going fast, going in haste. إن ذهبنا نستبق وسابقوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم, be like as if you are in a race. So فاستبقوا الصراط. فاستبقوا الصراط, they try to go to the salat fast and as if they are in a race. And a salat from صاد راء طاء. فأن is a word used for تحرف, that shows that how far that is to happen. فأن, far is for them. It gives the meaning of how, right? But it's in a way that it's, how can that happen? It's impossible to happen. Why? Because their eyes are wiped. فأن يبصرون, from basara, that means from seeing. ولو نشاء, and if we will, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, لمسخناهم. Lam here is like the لطمسنا لمسخناهم, lam التوكيد, to stress the meaning. And مسخ is the transformation, something is transformed to something else. مسخنا, we, hum, them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, he can change and transform them while they are committing sins to something else, like he did to some of the people of Bani Israel. لمسخناهم على مكانتهم, on their مكانة, when their مكان refers to the place or to the time. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم on their position, on their places. فما استطاعوا, so they're not able to, from طاء واو عين, the ability to do something comes from the obedience. مضيا, to proceed, from ميم ضاد ياء. مضى means past, something past. فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون, from رجع, that means return. And then ومن نعمره, from عين ميم راء, give him a long life. And العمر is one's lifetime. The word is used also for the building because it's something that is established, is a life. العمارة, or as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, والبيت المعمور, إنما يعمر مساجد الله, those who occupy the masajid of Allah, so they make it a life. It's not about the structure, it's not about the bricks, but what's in there by the acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرْهُ نُنَكِّسْهُ. نُنَكِّسْهُ, as I said, as we heard, reverse it, make him return back from nun, kaf, sin. That means he back to the weakness again. And as we heard, ثُمَّ نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ, to invert something when it's inverted. Right? And it's نُنَكِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. That means he returned back into the creation of weakness. أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ, shouldn't they have the aql and the reason to reflect upon this? So as we see from these verses, since it's talking about the hereafter, it shows the power of Allah, and it shows that the justice of Allah will be served. And part of the perfect justice of Allah, that the parts of the body of the people would speak against them, the disbelievers, the hypocrites. And what matters for the person in the hereafter is what he earned or what she earned of actions. And guidance is in the hands of Allah, so a person should have the fear not to lose guidance by taking the means to be obedient to Allah and to be warned against what's mentioned about the Day of Judgment. When we see the reality of this life, that shows the cycle of the human beings. So, and how is that related to aql, to reason, is not to be so much attached to this world, but rather to take from it what is necessary for the person's hereafter, to be saved in the hereafter from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب, بارك الله فيكم. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala Saturday. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.